All right. Welcome, everybody. We are live. Just Two Dads. I am co-host Brian Altounian here with you as we do every week with my partner in Thrive, my friend Shawn Francis. We get together and talk to phenomenal people who are making a difference in the world, not only with our special needs families. This is really the nexus of how this whole thing started. It was a conversation that Shawn and I had about our children who are part of the special needs community. Shawn has a son on the autism spectrum. My oldest daughter was born with some learning disabilities and some challenges, and we were thrust into and involuntary members of the special needs community. And some of the challenges that we've encountered as we do the work that we do in our professional lives, Shawn and I decided as we were having conversations, we realized we wanted to have an impact on the special needs communities in the areas of helping people with their finances and planning for the future. And those conversations turned into conversations with experts, and we call them warriors, people who are making a difference in the special needs community. It's blown our mind, the work that people are doing, and that conversation turned into Shawn and I having regular conversations about the impact that an individual can have on their communities around them. And we thought, why don't we share these conversations with the rest of the world? And that became the beginning of the Just Two Dads weekly podcast that we do. We've had phenomenal guests. Susan, I hate to say this, we're going to fall in love with you by the time this is all over, because we fall in love with our guests because the work that you do is so phenomenal. And our lives, our families, and our communities are greatly impacted by the work you're doing, whether directly or indirectly. And so we're just grateful to be able to have this conversation. We're doing this live here on Facebook, but we're also on so many podcast outlets and distribution platforms like Spotify and Pandora and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Can't even say it, you guys. Google Podcasts and other outlets, and now down in WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands as well. So we've got a broad reach, and what we're encountering are phenomenal people who are doing great work. So today is an opportunity for us to have people hear your story, Susan. I'm excited to get into it with you and hear what you're doing. We love your commitment, your story, how it all came together. So I'm going to jump into that in just a second. I want to welcome everybody and our regular followers and watchers and listeners. Thank you all for being there. My daughter Jordan is one of our frequent contributors, and Robert Moorhead and a bunch of folks. We would say hello to everybody and everybody listening wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully this is a compelling story. So without further ado, that's probably one of my longest introductions, Shawn. Shawn, good afternoon, my friend. How are you, buddy?
I am blessed, honored, and grateful. And it's not one of the longest introductions. It is the longest introduction of yours, but that's okay. We strive to improve, and that's a personal best. So with that said, I will create a miracle and let my introduction be short. Brian and I have many things in common. One of them, which is that we always joke about how long-winded. Well, I'm more long-winded than you. No, you're not. But anyway, our story here today, our guest today is none other than Miss Susan Fink, and we are just honored and pleased to have her here with us. You know, one of the first things that you go through as a parent to a child with special needs is you consciously and subconsciously feel that nobody knows what you're going through. Nobody knows what your situation is. And in Susan's case, knowing what I know of her story, her challenges, it's a little more difficult, I would think, from my perspective, for her to turn her challenges into gifts, but she's done just that. And as every hero has an origin, Susan, please share with us and let us know how you got your powers, how you became the person that you did to raise the child that you have. And welcome, welcome, welcome.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You did warn me there would be tears, and I already have tears of gratitude for being here and, just being a part of your show and also being able to share, where I've come from and how I've gotten to this place, and being able to really try to help other people, which I believe is really my mission and my purpose through all of the pain that I've gone through. And my journey with my son with autism, started when he was 3 years old. But I think some things that I've shared with the both of you is that I think that, I was being prepared for him way before he came into this world and before he was diagnosed. So
Great.
as some of you may have seen in some of the posts and things, I've had a lot of adversity thrown my way from a medical perspective and from relational perspectives. And so, I went through in my 20s having cervical cancer, in my 30s having brain surgery. I also separated from my ex-husband and was on my way to divorce. And after I moved out of our house, 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. And I decided to go through that journey alone, working full time as on a single income and just pressing forward through a lot of darkness and a lot of difficult times. And, even just being a single parent from the beginning was difficult. And once he was diagnosed, it became an even bigger whirlwind of adventure, I'd say. And,
Sure.
I've been in a lot of really difficult experiences and times where I've had to work really hard on my mind and really trying to push through how I focus and where I put my focus, and whether that's going through cancer, going through brain surgery, going through a divorce while you're 8 months pregnant, finalizing the paperwork, going through some really difficult times. I really had to dig very deep into, the inner part of myself to really push myself through a lot of those times. And I believe that the character that I was building during those moments in my 20s and 30s, even before that, helped me lay a strong foundation to handle my son's diagnosis. And even through that period, still going through a lot of really challenging emotions and things that a lot of us parents go through in the initial diagnosis, having to really focus on where I'm thinking, how I'm thinking, and being able to find that strength from somewhere deep down inside to keep going. And I really leaned a lot on my faith. And a lot of what I learned was that you can take pain that you're going through and turn it into purpose and really help someone else. So if you actually take your mind away from yourself and focus it on being of service to someone else or helping other people, it really helps you get out of this negative space that you can find yourself in. And I was in some really dark places, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, and it's called Rise with the Light, is because I was in a lot of dark places of depression and even having things like suicidal thoughts and, really being just full of anxiety, full of fear, full of worry throughout a lot of different situations, including my son's diagnosis, and going through all of that alone. And, I really had to find the light that was still there. And something that I told both you, Shawn and Brian, about was when I was going through these difficult times, there was a thing that I heard that said, when you're in the darkness and you see a shadow, there is light. And even if that light is so small, there is still a shadow. And when you see that shadow, there's light. There's light somewhere. And so that light is hope. And when I heard that, sorry.
Okay,
It really,
okay.
Good.
I'm trying to make you guys cry. It really to cry with me. It really was so profound. And it was just it made me realize that there is a way through all of the pain. And if I can work on myself, work on my mind, work on where I'm putting my focus, and just take things one day at a time, I knew that light would get bigger. And starting doing the things that I've been doing to try to help other people, that light continues to get bigger, and I am trying to give that light to someone else so they can get through.
I was just going to say, I didn't interrupt, but first of all, there's four distinct things that are difficult for an individual to process anyways, right? One, obviously, cervical cancer, Oh my gosh, right? That's at a young age. Well, that has its own, by the way, its own community, its own,
Right.
its own issues.
Right.
Brain surgery. Now you've added a layer. You're now in a you're in an elite class, right? Not only people who've had brain surgery, but you've recovered from brain surgery. So congratulations. But oh my God, going through divorce. Okay, now that's a little broader. It's a little broader audience. I'm a member of that community as well. But that's a challenge, especially when you found out that you were pregnant, so quickly after going through that process. And that's a process that once you begin, it's kind of hard to put the reverse engine on and kind of go back. And then having your child be diagnosed with a disability or some sort of issue. Susan, the fact that you are standing, I think, is commendable, right? I think that people should understand, those you've been for surfers, they go out in the waves, during a big storm, and they get out and they get smacked by a big wave, and they get up again, they get smacked again, they get up, they get smacked. You've been smacked by, God's waves, if you will, right? A few times. Yes. The fact that you're not only standing and surviving, but you're thriving and sharing that story with so many people, man, hats off to you. I can't imagine being in that place, right? Shawn, are you gonna say something? I'd be like, I'm just blown away by you.
I was gonna say, tell us something, because we all are who we are, where we are, because of who and where we come from. Because we've either came from a situation that nurtured us, or where we are those things because of or in spite of a situation. So tell us a little bit about, because some people become great parents in spite of having bad parents. They're determined to be the opposite. Some people are great parents because they've had a good example. So tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you're from, how you grew up, and what it is that fortified you to get to this point. Because these are the things that make us who you are. Let us know where your powers come from, because you obviously have them.
Yeah. How does how does somebody have that fortitude? That's a good question, Shawn. How? Tell us.
Well,
it's amazing. Blown away.
I was raised in a military family. So, I was raised in an Army family. So I'm an Army brat. Yes. To all those brats out there. I'm proud to be a brat. But, cool. Being in a military family, my dad was a very high-ranking command sergeant major in the Army, and we moved every 2 to 3 years. And in moving, because he was relocated because of whatever, I really don't know what he did, because it was a very secret job that he had, but we went along with him, and I had to change schools, friends, houses, everything, right? And I think the adapting ability that comes from that has helped me to realize things that I may not be in control of, and address the things that I can control. And I think that's something I've learned over the years, and especially as I've been in, my 30s and 40s, and things that you just come like a diagnosis of autism that you can't control, but you have to identify the things that you can control and how you put your focus. And so we moved around my whole upbringing and being in a military family. And, my parents have been together for I think 48 years or something like that.
Wow.
I have a really strong family foundation with my parents, and the love that they have for each other, the perseverance that they've gone through. My mom is Korean, my dad's from Canton, Ohio, so there's a language barrier at times, the struggles that they had, they stayed together through so much adversity, and I see that strength come from my parents. And I think that's what I try to inherit from them, is that strength. But what I would say is, in the upbringing that I had, a lot of times you kind of sweep things under the rug, and I think different generations are different, right? I think an older generation, maybe you don't really talk about your emotions, or you don't let things out. And you kind of, I remember when I was going through my divorce, and my ex-husband would kind of come and see our son, my mom would always say, put on a happy face. And that kind of just means her way of just saying, don't let him see, your emotions. And I think that that's something that I've learned to do the opposite. You know, I think it's really important to be able to be vulnerable and to show your emotion and to talk about it. I feel like if you don't let things out, they manifest in so many other ways, and it can be very negative. And, you know, I think for me, I really believe in, instead of sweeping it under the rug, let's talk about it. Let's get it out so that we can actually heal from those things, and instead of harboring them. And we can become better from those things versus being bitter. And those are, you know, I think for me, foundationally, something that I had to change, and something I really strongly do with my son. And as he becomes more and more verbal, I have been really working with him on being able to express how he feels and what he's going through, so that he doesn't feel afraid to talk about it. Because kids on the spectrum and kids, you know, any disability, any child really, you know, is going through a lot. And I think it's really important for them to have a voice and not feel like they have to hold on to all of those feelings. Brian,
I was going to ask you, because I love this conversation, and obviously this becomes a regular conversation that Shawn and I have, and I think a badge that we wear proudly. Men don't generally have that bent, right? They're not necessarily leaning into, I'm going to show my vulnerability and share my feelings. Shawn actually did a 30-day vulnerability project where he actually shared vulnerability on a daily basis on social media. By the way, I'm a big fan of it, but I'm kind of a big fan of somebody else doing it. I'm not, right? You know, I think I'm like, I laud Shawn's, you know, effort to put himself out there. I'm like, good for you, man. That's awesome. I'm okay crying in public, so that doesn't bother me, but the vulnerability and sharing sharing your ideas, that's, am I right? Like as you in your work that you're doing now, you're finding that's not to be stereotypical, but that's sort of stereotypically, you know, where women excel at, men are really not good at it. We're trying to change that a little bit by the work that we do here.
Right.
Would you agree? Like, are you seeing that the lean is including more men in that conversation in the work that you're doing?
Yes. I actually interviewed this guy, Jamel Owens, who is out of Philly, and he is a huge advocate in the autism community. I did an episode with him on my podcast, and it was so refreshing to hear him speak about being vulnerable and open, and how the fact that he's been able to do that can help other men and boys, you know, as they're being raised, to be able to speak up and to speak out. And I think that's so important to keep our future generation too being able to do that. But I do believe that, you know, women, if we're looking at female male, you know, we're typically more emotionally driven, right? I think we are kind of more naturally able to do that. And I do think from generation to generation, it's been kind of like, oh, you're not supposed to show feelings. You're supposed to be tough, and you're supposed to be, you know, the man, right? And I think, you know, that barrier is coming down. I think it's really important for future generations for that barrier to come down, because the more you can actually let it out, the more healing it is, like I said. But also for me, it's really about, you know, letting people know that they are not alone. You know, I think if you can express how you're feeling and getting it out in a positive way, and, you know, other people can relate to it. You know, if you even take things like the mustache movement, you know, Movember, it's all about men talking about different types of cancers, right? Prostate cancer, depression, suicide, things like that. You know, they started that movement, and it was all because of a mustache, and they can start the conversation. And I really think that that is such an amazing way that people can connect, and they can help each other and lean on each other. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do too, is I'm trying to, I mean, even every episode that I do for my podcast, I actually cry on every episode. When I'm writing it, I have ugly crying. And when I'm recording it, I have to edit out all of the tears and some of it, you know. And so I have like a very cathartic experience when I'm doing this, because I feel like I'm just letting everything out that I haven't been able to let out, especially being alone and single, when I don't have like a significant other or anybody to really talk to on a daily basis, you know, letting that out so that people can connect. And if you are vulnerable and can be, you know, to put those guards down, I think the more we can connect on a human level and really help each other.
You know, it's interesting. And I think about the pandemic and the fact that people are going through such, mental health challenges, that one of the biggest problems, if you will, of this is the work at home, stay at home, school from home idea is that we can't connect, and we are finding it difficult, and especially for those of us who are single parents, that it is a challenge, right? How do you, that's been exacerbated, the ability to connect with people and safely connect and kind of stay in communication. And so, what do you generally tell people who are dealing with this now? Like, how do you do that? I mean, obviously you've created a podcast, and so you've created an outlet for yourself, but how do you coach other people? What do you tell them to do to kind of get that, strengthen that mental health issue for them?
Yeah, I think a big thing is to, number one, I kind of go to this, which is the serenity prayer, which is all about understanding what you can and can't control. I think sometimes we have a harder time with things because we want to control certain things that we can't control. And that creates friction, right? It creates more stress and anxiety. So I think kind of taking a step back and saying, okay, what can I do? What am I in control of in this situation? And of course, so many of us are in this pandemic where we are isolated, and so I think finding ways to be able to connect safely. And maybe that's, even just talking on the phone. I know a lot of people don't talk on the phone these days because that's old school, but, talking on the phone, or, setting up a Zoom or, doing a FaceTime or something. And sometimes, that's not always easy to do, but it's kind of scheduling those things out. I've actually been doing that myself with some friends that I have, and we do that once a month. A group meeting where you can talk to other people. The other thing is, if you are able to meet in person, going for a walk together, keeping your distance, being just safe and doing the basic guidelines, right? But if you don't have those outlets, I think the biggest thing is to actually talk to yourself through journaling or finding ways to find gratitude, and practicing gratitude and practicing journaling and getting all of these emotions out is so important if you don't have another outlet. And so for me, for example, every day I journal, I write down things, at least 1 to 3 things that I'm grateful for, and focusing on that gratitude and having that, it helps you perpetuate more positive thinking. And rather than going down a negative path. But, from a mindset perspective, those things take practice. And so, it's like, oh, I can write down something I'm grateful for one day, but then I don't do it the next day and the next day, and then I come back to it. It's like you kind of have to do this every day, or create a routine for yourself where you're practicing it. And then you get better at it. And then your mind you kind of retrain your mind. So your mind starts to think differently and see things differently. And the other thing that I recommend too is that if you are in the home, or you're, just everything's at home right now, right? But if you're there and you are kind of going down a darker path, one thing that I do is change my environment. I step outside and get some air. And there's these exercises you can do called grounding that really help you to ground yourself in the present. And so I actually did some videos on that on my Instagram this week to give some advice on how to do that. But, even stepping outside, taking some deep breaths, looking around you and your environment, and identifying, smells and sights and sounds and things can help you kind of reshift your focus from whatever you're going through in more of a negative state to a positive state. And that includes loneliness. I've had to deal with loneliness for a long time, being single and alone. And those are some of the ways that I recommend when I work with people to help them kind of break through some of those negative moments that they might be in.
To piggyback on the idea of the gratitude journal, there is the concept of a gratitude jar, which is, you get a jar, the bigger the better, and you write on it one thing that you're grateful for each day, just on a Post-it or a sticky. And you don't do that when you're down. You do that every day, period. And when it accumulates over a period of time, you've got a down day, you go to the jar, you open it, and you've got something to be thankful for. What I do with mine is, I'd like to tell you that I do it every single day, rain or shine, but I can't do that and be honest at the same time. But I do it fairly often. And then second oldest daughter actually gave me a miniature version of it, which is just a little plastic box, and this is for when you're down. She was going to school for her master's at the time, and so she wasn't working. Money was tight, but it's one of the most valuable gifts that I've ever had. And so what happens is you have something to reflect upon. So what I do is I'll do that, and then you write a date on it too. And then you can look back and I remember that day. I remember exactly when that happened, and you forget what you have to be grateful for, because in the moment versus the horizon and the vision, it's so easy to be like, there's nothing to be thankful for, like right here and right now. The other thing I was going to say is the great Dr. Maya Angelou had a saying where she would say that words are things. They get in our clothes, in our skin, in our furniture, and everything. So that was said from the perspective of being careful of what you say, because words can affect people. But words are so powerful that if they're not said out loud, they're still going to do their thing. If they're positive, they're going to serve you positively. But if they're negative, they're going to serve you negatively. So when they're kept inside, they're almost as strong as they are when they're spoken out loud. We talk about saying affirmations for the purpose of attracting that which we want and getting it out. But when it's inside of us and, we're not even aware of what we're saying, that's just as dangerous too. So that's why it becomes important to make sure that we do express how we feel and what we have. And let me ask you this, because it can be kind of tough to strike a balance between expressing yourself and complaining. How do you personally do that? Because you've got enough to have complained about if you chose that path and you have not. So how do you do that?
Oh no, I complain.
Okay.
But here's what I'll tell you I do that I've trained myself to do. But I love what you said. If I can go back to the gratitude jar, I actually do this with my son. And we also figure out something our dog is grateful for too that day.
I love it.
So every day we have, one for mommy, one for my son, and one for Riley, our dog. And we write
your
it down.
dog's name's Riley?
Yes.
What breed is your dog?
She's a pug Chihuahua Terrier.
Our Riley is half Chihuahua and half Beagle.
Oh, no way. They're cousins.
Yeah.
Funny, they're both
hilarious.
But yeah, so we actually do a gratitude jar, and we just finished January. When we finished January, we pulled everything out. I laid it on the table. I actually think I took a picture of this and put it on Instagram, but I laid it on the table and we read through every one of them. And
that's great.
It was so amazing. And one thing I asked my son, I said, how do you feel after you do a gratitude? And he goes, happy. And he's 7.
I was just going to ask.
So it's like, it does make a big difference. But like you said, it's something you do, whether you feel good or you don't feel good. And with those negative feelings, I actually have a let it go box. And this is it says, let go, let God, but I'm a Christian, but not everyone's a Christian. So, I'm not trying to push any religion on anyone, but I have a box, and it can be any box. Right. And so what I do is I write a Post-it, I have my Post-it notes in here, and I write down, I date it, and I write down, oh, look at us. Look at you.
That's crazy.
I write down, that is crazy. I write down the date, and I write down, okay, so here's one. It says, this was from November of last year. It says, I'm feeling angry and resentment about being single and alone for almost 8 years. I feel like I will be alone forever. And this was actually right before I started my podcast. And I was going through these fears and emotions, and I have to write these. I have a lot in here. If I can write this down and put it in my box, it helps me to release that thought, so that I don't ruminate about it over and over again. And if I ever want to come back, I come back to this, and I'm reading it today, February 24th, 2021, what is that? Almost 4 months later, I don't feel this way.
Yeah.
And I was able to release it and let it go, and also be able to, when I'm writing it, be able to acknowledge it. Right. So it's a big thing of like you said, the thoughts can be in our minds. We may not actually speak it, but if we can get it out and write it down, spend a moment thinking about it, and then letting it go. And when I work with clients, mindset coaching clients, I actually give them different options. This is actually something I learned when I was in therapy for a long time, but I give my clients options. You can rip it up, you can burn it, you can, crumple it up and throw it away. There's something about the physical aspect.
The release.
The
Right?
release.
The
Yes,
release.
the physical aspect of letting it go, right? When you're done with thinking about the thought, give yourself some time to think about it, but don't let it take over your life or your day, or right. And don't let it impact other things. Give it the attention that it deserves, maybe a few minutes, and then handle it and let it go and do something physical to let it go. And that has been so healing. And to not harbor all of those feelings, because I tend to ruminate. Ruminating is like thinking over, it's like a spinning hamster.
Reliving it. Yeah.
Relive it, right? And doing these actions really helps me to, and helps other people to just release them, make room for other things to come into your life that are positive.
Yeah. Right. I am by no means, a therapist, but if anybody is listening that is a therapist, they can chime in on this. Here's a reason why I think that's effective, because it's one thing to have positive thinking, right?
Right.
It's another thing to perform critical thinking. And critical thinking is what is described as thinking about what you think about. And so if you think about it, because if you're not thinking of your thoughts, they rule you, they run you, and they become, they become subconscious and they're automatic. And we can have good things on autopilot as well as bad things. But when you think about what you're thinking about, in other words, you're raising your consciousness, you're taking a minute to step outside yourself, and you can catch yourself when you're in the moments of those things. One of the books that my dad turned me on to years ago, which is one of the type of reasons why I cherish my relationship with him, was a book called The Handbook to Higher Consciousness. And to me, I'm at a point where we used to have this saying as kids and as children, and my aunt would say it as well, is that if the world was falling down, my dad would probably just step aside and let it crumble and then go about his business. And I literally saw that happen. When I was a kid in the Virgin Islands, there was a tremor, and those things weren't very common. And my mom and my brother and I ran out of the house, and the house is shaking and everything. We come back inside, my dad is in bed reading a book. He just doesn't know what it means to worry. And so but when your consciousness is up, so he would seem like things would just flow. And I'm at the point now where I don't have it mastered, but I can at least catch myself and go, oh, here's what I was thinking in that moment. And when we write those things down, we can go back to it and, and review it. If anybody's listening that's a therapist, please chime in at some point and let us know how right or wrong I am with that.
Are we doing a good job here?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think it's so important to let it go. But like you said, to be aware, the awareness is the biggest thing. Like, I think a big thing with having a child with autism too, is being aware of my emotions and understanding, how I'm feeling, why I'm feeling, and giving it that attention, but then not letting it completely take over. And when I'm going into a moment of worry or anxiety or something's, stress, whatever that is, sadness, I can catch myself, like you were saying, Shawn, I can catch myself. And then I have what I call a toolbox. These are all of the tools over the years that I've built. It's a pretty massive toolbox, actually. And that I can kind of say, okay, what are the things that are in my toolbox that I can use to get through this moment? And I've been able to build that so that I have those things readily available. And I really work with my people that I work with in my mindset coaching stuff to help them build their own toolbox, because that's different for a lot of people and how they handle things. But yeah, these are, techniques that have worked for me and for other people too. I'm sorry, Brian. I think I cut you off there.
That's okay. There's so many. There's so many things to talk about. This is so fascinating. And now that what's going to happen is we're going to be done here, and we're like, wow, we didn't have enough time to cover everything.
We need another episode.
I know it's always the way it is with us, because we get so engaged in the conversation. I'm not Christian, and I still believe the whole "let go, let God" concept. I talk about it all the time. The idea that we're so inundated with so many thoughts, and as Shawn's talking about, that our brain can't really hold and process everything at once, and so we have to choose. And of all the infinite number of negative things that we generally think about, people forget that there's also an infinite number of positive things that we can be thinking about. We just, for some reason, human nature is we just choose the negative stuff. And so, the idea of really creating a way to release. What I was going to ask you, Susan, though, is, and you started to touch on it, it is what was the decision process? And I know now we can narrow it down to sometime in November of last year. But what was the thing that made you go, I'm going to take this stuff that I've processed and I'm now going to turn it into something that leads to an outreach so that other people can benefit from my experience? When did you make that decision, and how did that come about? And what is it that you're doing? So you mentioned your clients, and tell us what is it you're doing for folks?
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention was that you said the things that we can choose to think about. I think it's so important to realize that we do have a choice in what we think about, and a lot of times naturally we go to the negative, but we can make a choice to go to the positive. And that is a concerted, intentional effort in most cases. But as you keep doing it, you will start to naturally go to that more positive place. Like the meter will shift because you're retraining your brain that way, is from my experience. But as far as starting the podcast and helping other people, and, I actually thought about doing this podcast over 2 years ago. And the biggest thing for me that was in my way was fear. I was afraid of, would people listen? Would it matter? Would it make a difference? Would what I'm saying make any sense to people? Am I just talking to myself? I was afraid, I was afraid of and also being vulnerable. I knew one of the things I knew going into it and thinking about it over 2 years ago was that I was going to feel all of the things again. And I knew it was going to be an emotional experience for me. And was I ready mentally to go through all of that again and, really put myself out there? And so it was a lot of fear. And as the pandemic happened last year, I felt this, it was so heavy on my heart to do this podcast, I knew, I was praying a lot and saying, why is all this happening? And what am I here to do? What is my purpose in life? And the pandemic really catapulted me to wanting to help people even more and working through the fear. I mean, I actually worked with other mindset coaches to help me. I was working through all of that fear and asking myself, well, what if, people did listen? Like, what about the opposite? Everything I was thinking was negative. So I had to really shift in thinking of, getting out of the what ifs and should haves and could haves and all those things, and just kind of getting to a point of saying, I need to just do it. Take one step at a time. So the first step I did was I bought a mic, and then a month later, I started writing. And then a month later, I downloaded Audacity, which is where I, do a podcast. So I took baby steps. And one of the things was I was also worried about being able to just do it, and it takes a lot of time to do a podcast, as you guys know, and a lot of energy and effort and time. So, I finally, as I took those baby steps, I finally put out the first episode, and really it was just a 6-minute or 7-minute introduction. And that was, again, a baby step. And then I started telling people about what I was doing, and the response I was getting was like that they were so happy that they found me and that they resonated with what I was saying and that it was helping them. And so that gave me, it fulfilled, it kind of like alleviated the fear, but also it fulfilled, like I was thinking I was doing something that was my purpose, and it kind of validated, sorry, I was looking for the word. It validated, that even if, and the one thing is, even if I affected one life, like that was enough. And I had to, really focus on my purpose. And as I was focusing on my purpose and getting it out, that's where the authenticity, the vulnerability, and really just where this is rooted from, it comes across, hopefully, to other people, that it is true and authentic, and that my purpose is truly to help them and to support them and give them ideas and my life experience of what we're going through. And so, it's definitely something that I had to work toward. And once I started, the momentum just has been going and going. And now I'm interviewing other people and sharing their stories and helping them, be able to have a platform too to speak from, and, sharing and just helping other people. And it feels so great to be able to do that. And I know that I am, doing what I believe is what I'm here to be doing, is helping other people.
Love that. Shawn and I talk about this all the time, that we're on somebody else's errands list, right? We're just performing the errands of somebody else, right, in this world that we're living in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
we get it. We're
Yes,
kindred spirits when it comes to that, and you're doing great. And so, where can people find your podcast? By the way, where are they going to find your podcast?
So the podcast is called Rise Light, and it can be found on any platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher.
Okay.
Oh, are we having
a little bit of
just a little bit?
We're having a little bit. It happens every week for us, so it doesn't. It's just the Zoom world we live in. We always have technical issues
of some kind. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all good. We're catching it all. I'd say we edit it, but
I usually find it around the 40-minute mark.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
So tell us, Susan, is your son's only diagnosis autism?
Right. Well, I'm on. Yeah, so he's diagnosed. Oh, no, but he receives speech and language therapy, occupational therapy for fine motor skills, behavioral therapy, as well as social skill therapy, also, and through his IEP at school, and then private therapy at home.
Gotcha. Okay, and it broke up some. You did say that it was primarily autism, right? Technology for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, good. I thought that. I just wanted to make sure, because the one thing that takes place again is
oh man,
there's so many layers and sub layers of human beings, race, gender, and then when you throw in special needs, it just goes deeper and deeper, because you've got Down syndrome, whatever diagnosis may be. And then when you take autism itself, with the spectrum of the disorder, there's anywhere that one might fit. And it is easy to also get caught up into, I've heard this saying, and it was Michael Jackson that said this, which is, that we should be more child-like and not childish. And I always use as an example of that when my wife and I first started dating. So I'm obviously an African-American man. My wife is Mexican. When we first met, when we first started dating, before we ended up, her sister's kids came to live with us. When I met one of the boys for the first time, my hair was longer. This is close to 20 years ago. And he happened to touch my hair, and he goes, Shawn, your hair feels like paper. And I laughed, and I just thought it was so pure. And, if we were more that way, where we're just curious about each other and more childlike, it would solve so much more of the world's problems. But what happens is, as we get older, we get really steeped into our own shoes, our own perspective. And so what happens is, here's what my child is diagnosed with, therefore this is what I'm going through, this is how this works. And when that happens, for as close to a justifiable reason as one can imagine, because it can be quite a challenge with a child that has special needs. But what happens is we tend to lose. We're challenged with trying to keep some of our empathy. And so for you to still have yours and not be part of a team and a single parent and everything, when your son is that young, it is beyond commendable.
Oh, thank you so much. I totally agree with everything you said. And, I wish we could actually be more childish, because I think we would be a lot more honest with each other. And, just have our truth come out. But yeah, I sometimes I just kind of think, I don't know where all of this comes from. I know that I'm a strong person, but it's taken a lot of work to get to this point. And so I don't want people to look and say, oh, well, she's always been like that. No, there have been some incredibly all of that become a whole as it relates to spiritual, mental, physical, and psychological. And, that is where all together I can have that strength to then help other people. Because if I didn't do all of that work, beforehand, I wouldn't be able to help people and fulfill the purpose that I believe I'm here to do on earth.
Definitely.
It's beautiful.
Definitely.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it really is incredible. I mean, for all the challenges that you have been through, to be able to funnel and channel your personal experiences and, give back to the world and share it with people, whether it's via your podcast or coaching or any of the work that you're doing, you really are like truly a servant leader, which is, every religion covers the idea that we serve, our purpose here on earth is to serve man, right? To serve each other and to, provide learning and opportunity wherever that shows up. So it really is, it's commendable. And you've been doing this all on your own and it is incredible. Where do you get so first of all, let me just honor that for a second. That's amazing. Just want to say that you're amazing.
Thank you.
Where does your relief come from? Where do you get a break? Where does Susan get an arm or a shoulder to lean on or an arm to?
Where's your respite?
Yeah. Where's your respite? Where do you get that?
Yeah, not a lot of respite. My son's dad is around, so he goes to his dad's house. And when he's there, I do all of my adult stuff. So I have to run the errands and do the groceries and do, just life, right? But I get my relief in being out in nature, hiking. I play volleyball. I played volleyball in high school and college, and I play volleyball still. And when I can through the pandemic, that's a way for me to exercise and to also get those endorphins going in my brain, to kind of fuel my brain that way too. And I really take a lot of time to rest. Whenever I have that time to rest, I use that time to rest and recover. And I used to feel guilty about doing stuff like that. But, it's kind of like, oh, I have this time and I need to do something with it. And, now I don't feel so guilty because I know the importance of resting and recovering, especially being a single parent, and to do those things and take that time for myself. And sometimes it's late at night, when my son goes to bed, I do decompress at night and I have like a nighttime routine where I look at my gratitude and I, write things down if I need to. I get ready for the next day to help alleviate any anxiety for the future, day. And I just, take some time to breathe. I do meditation. And even if it's like a 10-minute guided meditation, just to have some quiet and peace in my life, even if it's to try to heal my body, heal my mind, and, rest and recover is really important.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, what would you say in your particular situation and as a single parent has been the biggest challenge that you think you've faced, as a parent, as a single parent to a child with autism, and in your journey? Because I know there's certain things that people try to, will relate to, and some that will seem foreign. What were you going to say, Brian?
I was just saying, just noted, like, after cervical cancer and brain surgery, right? All those other massive life challenges you've overcome, right?
Yeah.
So after that fact, like, what are the other, really, like, I'm so blown away by you, Susan. I'm honestly, I'm in awe. I think it's a great question, Shawn. And I'm curious to hear your answer, Susan, but like, my God, like what you have been through, like, what's your challenge? What's your current challenge? Now, what other massive life event are you fighting and winning?
Well, let me add one thing. What I'm doing is resisting the temptation to say there probably hasn't been that much of a challenge. She's seeing everything, and that's a little thing to a giant, and she's a giant. But again, to step in your shoes and add perspective. What is that? What is that one thing? Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing, but the biggest thing, and I actually did an episode on this on the podcast because it was so huge. And every situation I've ever been in was to let go of the fantasy that I had in my life. So the fantasy of having a child who could do a lot of things, and the vision I had when he was born, letting go of being in a marriage and having foundation of, two people together, seeing it like my parents, right? I mentioned they've been together for, I think, 48 years or something,
right.
Letting go of this fantasy of what you thought things were going to be like, to accepting what it actually is. And that is so hard for so many people. And when we resist, when we resist that, what is actually happening, it creates so much more grief and hardship for ourselves. And I talk about grieving the things that you never had. And I think, a lot of times people think of grieving as something that you lost and something that you had, but you lost. But in my case, I've had to grieve so much of things that I never ended up having.
They never materialized.
And that's the same. Yeah. And that's the same thing as, grieving. The process is the same, whether you grieve something you had or you grieve something that you never had. And that has been something that I've had to, overcome and also accept what's on, and kind of get my big girl panties on and saying, okay, I'm accepting it, and I need to get things done. I need to figure it out, right? I need to get into action and really be able to handle my own emotions through all of that. And, not letting those things get in the way. And I recently anger on my latest episode, and it's all about not letting the anger get in the way of what you can actually see that's right in front of you, which could be such a huge blessing. And sometimes we don't deal with our anger. So having to kind of work through all of those emotions and letting go of the fantasy, grieving the fantasy of what I thought things were going to be like, and then accepting what is going on and doing what we need to do to then, whatever is in our control that we can do. And so those are the big things.
There's two things
I've gone through.
Yeah, amazing. There's two things there that goes back to your comment about the serenity prayer. And then we talked about this last week because I sent Brian a text maybe a Sunday and a half ago. And, we don't have any advertisements on this show yet, but but we believe we're referral based naturally. If we have a good experience someplace, we want other people to know. And there's a series on Apple Plus called Home. And each episode refers to a different experience with regard to people that build homes. And the first episode happens to be a father who is in the Netherlands with his family, and he has built a greenhouse, around their home. So they grow fruits and vegetables in their home, and he's repurposed the plumbing so that there's a plant underneath the house, so to speak, that repurposes the sewage water, cleans it, and takes care of everything that they need. And they have several children, including a set of twins, a boy and a girl, and the boy is on the autism spectrum. And I'm watching it and enthralled by it, especially because, we belong to a men's group where we're talking about self-sufficiency and things like that. So you think about growing your own food and everything. And I was into that part. Then he talked about the obvious, which again hit me, and, which I had almost forgotten about, which is the idea that every parent grieves. Because when you become a parent, when you become a parent, you do have a vision as to what your child is. Maybe not exactly what they're going to look like, but your favorite sports team that you're going to impart that on them, your favorite dish, your favorite show, your favorite movie, whatever have you. And what this man was saying is that, and it brought me to just completely to tears at the moment, because what he said is when he let go of everything that he thought his child was going to be and accepted him for who he is, and then I got to thinking, like, gosh, if you don't do that, are you loving your child for someone other than who they are? So you take a neurotypical situation, take the special needs component out of it. It's no different than somebody sitting up and thinking, well, what you're going to do is you're going to go to this school and get this degree, and you're going to marry this girl and from this family, and and be anything other than yourself. And it doesn't mean that you can't bring out the best version of a child that has special needs, but the closer it is to what you think or would like them to be is, it's just, it's not an easy thing to do, but it is as worthy as it is difficult.
I
think it's, again, I think this is the kind
absolutely.
of work that...
And if you look at my podcast logo.
Keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's okay.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, if you look at my podcast logo, you'll see that there's arrows and there's kind of lines at the bottom of the arrow. And that is actually meant to represent the roots of a tree. And the arrow is going up. So the idea here is that you almost have to uproot yourself and pull out the roots and plant a new seed. And that was something that I feel like in this conversation is so relevant, because sometimes we have to get out of what we thought and rip all of that out and start over again and realize, accepting that those roots are, no longer there, and we have to move forward with something new and be okay with that. Yeah. And I think that's so important. Yep. I know we're running out of time. Thank you, Brian, for letting me squeeze that in.
No, I'm glad. For those who are not on our podcast live, but are listening to this, Susan's her Instagram is at susanfink.rise, SUSANFINK.RISE. So just go to that, and we can find your podcast. Go to Instagram. We'll post that. Thank you for posting that up there, Shawn. Was that right, Susan? People can find your podcast if they go to your Instagram. They can see your feed. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
In the bio,
perfect.
They can see the link and find the podcast there as well. Yes.
We say this every week. We get through this, and and now it's becoming all of our. Anybody who listens to us, they go, here they go again. But literally, we get to the end of the hour, like, oh my God, like we could keep going. This is so fascinating and enthralling, and our we're so grateful to you for being on the show with us today, and what an amazing story. You have redefined the term warrior. For those of us who face challenges every day, it's just thinking about the work that you're doing and what you've overcome in your life, and the fact that you've been able to do. So what Noreen has put. Did I click on that? I'm not sure. Noreen, one of our listeners has typed in a message. You're awesome, Susan. My son works at a school with autistic kids, and wow, I commend you for what you do. Okay, I guess we've taken it off. But anyways, For those who can read it, we're going to post it on there. Thank you, Noreen. You're amazing for doing this. I started to say, for those of us who have challenges every day, you've overcome so many amazing adversities that you really have, like I said, redefined the term warrior. So we thank you for your time here. We want to be able to. By the way, I think you should also, some of the past episodes that we've had, there are we've worked with Jessica Pate of We Are Brave Together, and Susanna Peace Lavelle, who is a coach for special needs families. There are so many phenomenal warrior women that we've had on this podcast that we'd love to connect you to, as well as, because I think the work that you're all doing together, they're all local here in Southern California, but obviously what we're doing extends beyond this LA boundary. We just think that you guys are doing phenomenal stuff. Shawn and I are honored to be part of this conversation. And at the end of the day, I always say, this is all about empathy and love, and man, you exude it to the nth degree. And we wish you such phenomenal luck to continue this effort and channel the work that you're doing to the service of so many other people. And we're grateful for the time that you've spent here with us. I'm grateful to the listeners, to my partner Shawn, and all the work that we're doing here, and people who have contributed to us. I'm sorry we can't get to all of the comments, but we will try to. And Susan, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And Shawn, in the last few seconds here, if you want to wrap us up here and close us out.
I'll do this. I'll run the great risk of running us over, because sometimes I ask this, sometimes I don't. Susan, I'll ask you one last question, and I'll make it really short. Share with us one belief that you held dearly, steadfastly to in the past that you no longer believe.
I think a limiting belief was that I couldn't make an impact. And now I don't believe that. I think I am making an impact. And even, like I said, even if I'm impacting one person, I'm making an impact. So I think all of us can.
Yes, you are. And with that said, that was perfect. I'm glad I asked it. So with that said, the whole purpose of this show is to shine a light on the guests and uplift them as much as we possibly can. So this is just the beginning of many great things that we can hopefully do together. And for those that are listening, our listeners in WSDX on St. Croix, thank you so very much. Those of you that are listening on various platforms, Google, Apple, Spotify, and those that continue to grow, we thank you so very much. And just remember that somebody out there needs to know that they care. Somebody needs to know that you care. Somebody needs to know that they matter. Somebody needs to be heard. And we have much more in common than we do otherwise. With that said, if you're watching, if you're listening, we love you. And thank you so very much. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so